sex just doesn't do it for some people.
The saying goes that sex sells. So how do you market characters who aren't driven by sexual attraction? Asexuals have long been ignored by movies and TV, and while they have gained some representation in the media in recent years,
I'm asexual!
the examples are still few and far between.
I think I'm asexual.
Asexual what? Dynamo? Deviant? Harassment lawsuit waiting to happen?
One potential reason for this is that a surface-level read of asexuality presents a problem for screenwriters. A hero has to want something. The story is driven by a desire, while asexuality is characterized by an absence of desire, at least in the sexual realm.
I'm just not interested in sex.
But of course, in reality, asexual people want lots of things. The problem is not that asexual characters don't want to connect with others.
We have the same desire for connection as everyone else.
The problem is that our modern cinematic language is not fluent enough in talking about non-sexual connection. So, a discussion of asexual representation opens up a broader conversation. Why does everything have to be about sex anyway?
If you're not having sex, what's there to talk about? Yeah.
Isn't it limiting to make a sexual relationship the only thing characters seek or need to be fulfilled?
Every television show and movie always has a character in it, right, that doesn't want to be in a relationship, right? They're happy with who they are, but then by the end of the series, guess what? They were wrong!
And how can we better represent asexuality on screen? Here's our take on how aces have long been erased in the media, and why recognizing that romance and sex are only part of how we connect with one another is important for all of us.
You guys have no right to make someone feel like their sexuality or lack of sexuality is disability.
If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get notified about all our new videos. The two words that best describe early asexual representation in media are ridicule and erasure. Long before asexual identity was a topic of discussion and research, there were some fictional characters in entertainment media that could be interpreted as asexual, but they were often presented as somewhat laughable. Gilligan of Gilligan's Island is comically childish and immature when it comes to sexuality.
Good heavens.
The Professor, explicitly described as asexual by the actor who played him, Russell Johnson, was one of the first characters on TV to be openly portrayed as possessing no interest in sexuality.
Gilligan is just a boy. Mr. Howell is a married man, and the professor is just interested in my mind.
But also inspired jokes with his naivete.
I tried to start intelligent conversations, but all she was interested in was hugging and kissing.
Jughead Jones of the Archie comics, who's more interested in food than in women, is a clownish character who wears a jester-style crown.
In Zdarsky's Jughead, he's asexual. That's the only Jughead where he is asexual. He's aromantic in the digest.
In the aughts, the actual term asexual appeared more on screen.
A distaste or lack of appetite for sex. That's me. I'm asexual.
But portrayals were pretty limited. They continued to play asexuality off as a joke.
I have a patient who's asexual.
A giant pool of algae?
While also casting doubt on its legitimacy as an orientation. In House MD, a character's asexuality is explained by biological dysfunction.
How'd you even know to look for a tumor?
While 2012's The Olivia Experiment implies that its would-be asexual heroine might be simply confused.
I guess I'm searching. I think I have an issue with intimacy.
In the show Sirens, the character Voodoo is actually asexual, but her identity is often discussed simply as a frustrating obstacle for potential suitors.
I, for instance, for years and years, thought I didn't like olives. Then one day I tried one. Now I think olives are tremendous.
So these examples deal less with how asexuals themselves experience their identity and more with how ignorant outsiders might see it.
You might also want to try sex as an option too.
Okay.
More broadly, beyond asexuality proper, throughout film and TV history, a perceived lack of interest or experience in sex generally tends to either be played as a joke or explained away. Think of how the word virgin is used as an insult.
You're a virgin who can't drive.
A hesitance around sex is often shown as laughable and shameful, especially in men.
You're a virgin!
I am. Shut up.
Overall, the messaging around sexuality in media has long told us that, firstly, there's always an explanation for a character not wanting or liking sex. They're lying, insecure, immature, impotent, shy, or anything other than simply uninterested. And secondly, that a lack of sexual experience is a funny pathology that can and should be fixed.
We just gotta make an agreement. Or, no, it's more than an agreement.
What, a bet?
A pact. We all get laid before we graduate.
This brings us to the second part of the picture, erasure. Sometimes, even when a character is officially defined as asexual by their creators, viewers still project sexuality onto them and ship them with other characters. But other times, asexuality gets more actively, intentionally erased. In Riverdale, adapted from the Archie comics, Jughead is given a romantic and sexual storyline.
I love you. Betty Cooper.
Sherlock Holmes, too, is ostensibly asexual in the original books, but in many of the on-screen adaptations has romantic and sexual storylines. And Sheldon Cooper of The Big Bang Theory, who is initially presented as someone with absolutely no interest in or understanding of sex.
We are going to ask Howard to choose between sex and Halo.
As far as I know, sex has not been upgraded to include high-def graphics and enhanced weapon systems.
And a strong distaste for intimacy.
I'm quite aware of the way humans usually reproduce, which is messy, unsanitary, and based on living next to you for 3 years, involves loud and unnecessary appeals to a deity.
Is eventually written into a more quote-unquote normal sexuality in later seasons.
Well, I enjoyed that more than I thought I would.
In recent years, while asexual characters on screen are still a rarity, there have been some portrayals that adopt the asexual perspective and actually try to explain it with empathy and nuance.
It's sort of like I'm surrounded by a huge feast with everything I could want to eat, but I'm not hungry.
The show Shortland Street takes care to differentiate asexuality from sexual dysfunction.
Some researchers see a link between asexuality and hormone levels, as you read on the net. But others think that asexuality is simply part of the human condition.
Similarly, on Game of Thrones, Lord Varys explains that his lack of sexual attraction to any gender predates his becoming a eunuch.
You did like boys before. Girls, huh?
I was never interested in girls either.
The scene where Varys discusses his asexuality also includes the biggest struggle that aces face.
What then?
Nothing.
Everybody is interested in something.
Asexual identity is often simply disbelieved.
You know, this thing is just a phase.
It isn't just a phase.
Even well-meaning friends tend to imply asexual characters just have yet to discover the person they feel sexual about.
And when you meet the right person, I'm sure you'll be ready.
So who do you like?
I don't like anyone.
That's redonkulous. You have to like someone.
A watershed moment for asexual representation came through Todd Chavez, the lovable and odd beanie wearer from BoJack Horseman, coming out as asexual.
It actually feels nice to finally say it out loud. I am an asexual person.
The show went on to portray the unique challenges of Todd's journey and the broader asexual community.
Oh, simple kettle corn. Between the worlds of the sweet and the savory. Not quite popcorn, not quite candy. What are we?
One episode finds Todd dating fellow asexual Yolanda Buenaventura and meeting her family, who are all obsessed with sex.
I'm but a humble, best-selling erotic novelist, and my wife is a world-famous adult film star.
The escalating absurdity that follows,
asexualize me like one of your French girls, Todd,
reflects the disorienting feeling of existing in a world that appears universally fanatical about something that doesn't do it for you.
I insist you spend the night and make love in my home.
Well, I know I can't think of a reason you wouldn't want to have sex in your parents' house.
Asexual advocates are often met with a lack of understanding as to why they feel the need to campaign for their community.
And then you have the asexuals marching for the right to not do anything.
But the idea that sexual attraction is a universal constant is so pervasive that being asexual must at times feel like being gaslit by the entire world.
Sometimes I think I should just do it, so everyone will shut up and stop making me feel like a freak.
Research suggests that around 1% of the US population are ace. The media has the power and the responsibility to help them feel seen and to reflect that wanting a life that's not centered on sexual connection is valid.
Do you ever feel like everyone's looking at you but nobody sees you?
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
Being asexual does not mean not wanting love.
I still want to fall in love.
Well, some asexual people still want romantic relationships, but they don't want the sex bit.
Just like most human beings, asexual people want to connect with others in a deep and meaningful way, and many pursue long-term partnerships.
When I meet someone, I get this excited feeling in my chest, and I can't stop thinking about them, and I want to spend all my time with them, but sex just isn't involved.
But our culture portrays romance as completely intertwined with and even contingent on sex. Because of this, an asexual person may assume that romance is simply out of bounds for them.
You know, I don't think I'm allowed to be in love.
On BoJack Horseman, Todd's girlfriend Emily can't understand why he doesn't desire her sexually.
What's your deal? I feel like you like me, but you don't like me.
Their breakup leads him to wonder if not wanting to have sex precludes him from having a relationship, until he starts dating another asexual person, Yolanda, and learns to navigate a romantic relationship without sex.
Well, not all asexuals are aromantic.
But he later comes to the conclusion that he and Yolanda aren't a deeper match beyond their orientation.
The only thing we have in common is that we're asexual.
Finally, he meets Maud, who's also asexual, but like Emily did, has personal compatibility with him, such as sharing his knack for initiating wacky business ventures.
But if their houses were made of cinnamon and dough, they wouldn't have to go anywhere. They could eat and live happily in their Cinnabungalow. Well, I think it's a great idea, and this customer thinks so too.
Refreshingly, Todd's story takes the comedy around asexual romance in new directions. The recurring joke isn't him not having sex in his relationships, but everybody around him assuming he does.
BoJack.
Maybe you two should just go see if the bed works.
Good morning, love bugs. Don't mind me, just passing through, not sneaking a peek at the love bugs.
There's nothing to see that would embarrass any of us. We are all fully clothed.
Instead of asking, why do romantic asexuals not want sex, the show asks, why do some people think sex is everything? Writer and philosopher Alain de Botton explains that sex and love were not always so closely linked.
Previously, people obviously had sex and had been in love. They didn't necessarily always see them as entirely conjoined.
He attributes their fusion to 18th century literary and intellectual romanticism.
Romantics believe that sex is the ultimate expression of love, which is why in the 19th century, adultery becomes a tragedy.
And de Botton suggests that some of our ideas about love only seem axiomatic because of the conventions of the love stories we're told.
It just meant that we were supposed to be together. I knew it the very first time I touched her.
Think how declarations of love are followed by kisses.
Let me make you happy.
Sometimes the kiss itself is the admission of feeling. Essentially, representations of sexual desire are the most common visual shorthand for feelings of romantic love and attraction. And this can create false expectations about what both sex and romance are. Refreshingly, today's shows and films are increasingly divorcing these two things. In Fleabag, the main character isn't using sex to seek love, but to escape from her own more intimate feelings of shame and grief.
I spent most of my adult life using sex to deflect from the screaming void inside my empty heart.
It's a shortcut to feeling accepted while avoiding revealing anything about herself besides her body.
The moment you realize someone wants your body.
When she does meet someone she falls for, their intimacy isn't established through a sex scene, but during a conversation.
What was that? What? Where did you just go?
The priest notices Fleabag breaking the fourth wall, which tells us that he is the only person who listens to her so intently that he can see when she removes herself emotionally. Looking back at the great on-screen romances too, it becomes apparent that the most memorable love stories often aren't told through sex, even if they do include it. Instead, emotional connection is built up through conversation.
Isn't everything we're doing in life a way to be loved a little more?
Or shared passion. And the meaningfulness of these bonds is established through plot. For example, by showing us how a friendship built over decades can blossom into romance.
We were friends for a long time.
And then we weren't.
And then we fell in love.
Or how love persists despite societal stigma.
I
I wish I knew how to quit you.
Ultimately, both stories that feature asexual characters and some of those that do not have the power to challenge the monolithic link between sex and romance and do more to delineate the two.
I haven't felt this way about anyone in a long, long time.
Kiss me.
It's not like that.
While some asexual people are interested in long-term romantic partnerships, others are not. So, another step in representing and learning from asexuality is to challenge the default primary importance of romantic love in our culture. Narratives often send the message that romantic relationships are the most important bonds non-related human beings can have.
We deserve the fairy tale!
The highest form of self-actualization.
You complete me.
But asexual and aromantic characters remind us that self-actualization is possible beyond romance. They demonstrate how work and friendship can provide as great a sense of fulfillment and meaning. Many characters that can be interpreted as asexual are written as married-to-the-job types. They are often creative geniuses.
I'd call you a genius, except I'm in the room.
The kind of people that are extremely and unilaterally talented and passionate about their work.
The need to find another human being to share one's life with has always puzzled me. Maybe because I am so interesting all by myself.
Sherlock Holmes fits this description in the books. It was not that he felt any emotion akin to love for Irene Adler. All emotions, and that one particularly, were abhorrent to his cold, precise, but admirably balanced mind.
I've always assumed that love is a dangerous disadvantage.
Doctor Who and Sheldon Cooper are also examples of the otherworldly genius who is aromantic and asexual. Both are brilliant in most realms besides sex and love, but in the early seasons of their respective shows are puzzled and confused by sexual matters.
You're a beautiful woman, probably.
The asexual loner genius trope makes intuitive sense. Someone with extreme and narrow talents would seem likely to have both poor social skills and little need or time for fulfillment outside of work. More broadly, characters who aren't focused on their sex lives may have more attention and energy to channel into success and influence in other areas. Lord Varys on Game of Thrones believes that his lack of romantic and sexual interests makes him more rational and prudent and less vulnerable to manipulation.
When I see what desire does to people, what it's done to this country, I am very glad to have no part in it.
However, the absence of a romantic life is typically portrayed differently for female characters.
She's just a sour old maid.
The archetype of the woman who spends her life without romantic love is the spinster, or the old maid, who's viewed by her society as invisible. Whereas the asexual loner male can get by as seeming above earthly matters, the female loner is pegged as a romantic failure.
She's old and hideous and dried up and has never known anything about love.
Of course, these stereotypes are now becoming more and more obsolete, but their existence points to the fact that for a long time, romance and marriage were the main forms of self-actualization available to female characters. One female character that breaks into the loner genius category is Elsa from Frozen.
I belong here, alone, where I can be who I am.
Elsa is read by many in the LGBTQIA community as queer, and the song Show Yourself has even become something of a coming-out anthem.
Or are you someone out there who's a little bit like me?
But Elsa has also become an icon for many asexuals because she not only struggles with her identity, but also displays absolutely no interest in romantic intimacy throughout both Frozen films.
Elsa doesn't focus on romantic love. That's what we love about the entire franchise.
The climax of Frozen takes the classically Disney idea of true love and repurposes it for a non-romantic sisterhood context, with the moral that true love means simply one's most important relationship.
You sacrificed yourself for me? I love you.
This is a good example of how there's really no need for the driving relationship of a story to be a romance. Elsa's and Anna's arcs are both tied to their relationship with each other.
We used to be best buddies, and now we're not. I wish you would tell me why.
And the narrative is driven by the disintegration and eventual rebuilding of this family relationship.
Of true love will thaw a frozen heart.
Looking closer at all the loner genius types mentioned earlier, they aren't actually alone either.
John stays.
That's why he stays.
Even though outwardly they may seem to have little need for a lot of human bonds.
No, I love my mother. My feelings for my Spot are much greater.
Ultimately, each relies on a close, long-term platonic friendship. Culturally, we tend to prioritize romantic relationships over friendships. Romantic relationships are presented as the ones we need to fight for and earn, the ones we come together as communities to celebrate. But stories can resonate even more universally when they center aromantic relationships and achievements, ending with the hero or heroine reuniting with their best bud, appreciating family or chosen family, or pulling off a creative achievement that fulfills their private soul. Ultimately, the popularity of stories about fulfillment beyond romance helps us understand that we all have a multitude of ways to achieve deep, meaningful connections.
Sex doesn't make us whole. And so, how could you ever be broken?
This video was written by friend of the take, Anya Formozova. If you liked the ideas here, you can check out her channel, Q22, for more interesting cultural insights.